So let's talk about alternative cryptocurrencies for a second. Mark, have you looked at any cryptocurrencies besides Bitcoin?
Not really. I've listened to you guys talking about Litecoin and whatnot. I had an interesting conversation with one of the speakers at the conference who was working on an altcoin. I think it was like a local altcoin. So this was at Ever Charlie Shrim's bar, and it was after a couple of drinks. So I don't remember the details, but I think it's great that there's all these different mutations coming out. The more the merrier. First of all, because even though Bitcoin is very hard to shut down because it's decentralized, there is that whole. I was actually pretty shocked when I heard on your program, and this came out at the San Jose conference, that like something like 48% of the mining power is in. What was it, one pool or?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that they're very consciously trying to keep it below that threshold because they understand that the value goes away, once you get up to 51%. It is conceivable that someone could do the 51% attack thing, and of course, if you destroyed Bitcoin, someone could always start it over again. I think the more the merrier. You said one size fits all doesn't work, and a lot of them might just fail or go nowhere. But you can't knock anyone for trying. That's the nice thing about Bitcoin and that whole community is that they're experimenting and they're doing things and they're building things. Everyone's talking about projects. They're talking about starting a company. I'm starting a startup. I'm starting an alt-chain. They're creators. They're not just bullshit artists like me, or a lot of people in the media kind of like sneer at Bitcoin and either say like, oh, it's a waste of time, or you're off in your own little world. It's a retreat. It's not a retreat. It's very social, both in terms of the aspect that it's peer to peer, and that just in terms of like the meetups and events like Satoshi Square. It's very social and interactive. They're building something, and who knows how long it'll last. But when people scoff at that, I say, well, what have you done? They're trying. Frycoin is interesting. I would actually kind of want to try it. I know that it's a very different philosophy behind it than the Austrian economic perspective, but it's kind of interesting.
So Frycoin is an altcoin that introduces a demurrage feature, which basically means that the currency over time disappears. Actually, it's not that it devalues; it's that literally some amounts of it go away. Is my understanding. I also have not used it, but that's my understanding of it.
It addresses the hoarding issue. If you believe that's an issue,
right?
Just as an aside, hoarding is a judgmental synonym for what our grandparents called saving.
Right.
But admittedly, yes. In a weak economy like this, where inflation has not been that great, even though despite monetary policy. I could see why people say, well, why do you care about inflation? Why do you, cryptocurrencies don't have to be Austrian. You could have a Keynesian cryptocurrency, I suppose. You could have a modern monetary theory cryptocurrency. One idea that keeps coming up is the government going to co-opt cryptocurrency? And I wouldn't mind that as long as it really was like physical cash in the sense that it had the irreversibility and the pseudonymity. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is nice to imagine. But, I think the more the merrier. So this guy that I was talking to, who was talking about one of his altcoins, he had a great analogy. He said, like, in a forest, you need, like, lots of different types of foliage or trees.
Right, monoculture doesn't generally work quite as well.
Right, exactly. So maybe it should be that way with money. Even, Dave Birch, who is not very popular in the Bitcoin community because he's always like the person quoted in Bitcoin articles sort of damning it with faint praise. But even he takes that position that, you should have lots of different types of stores of value. You should have, and so in the future there will be like government currencies and private currencies. And people will keep some of their value in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, some of it in dollars and some of it in kilowatt hours. The experimentation, it's very, I see little downside from it. Like we were saying earlier with the merchants, the more alternatives, the merrier. One other thing I want to mention about neutrality that I actually didn't get a chance to say on the panel, but it's just a great example. If you go to a site called CoinDL.com, they sell content, they sell ebooks, they sell music. There's a musician in Iran named Mohammed Rafiq. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name. He's in Iran. he sells MP3s of his music through this site. It is not illegal under the sanctions to buy music from someone in Iran. I have confirmed that. I called the U.S. Treasury and I specifically asked them that. They said there isn't exception for information. As a practical matter, though,
right?
You know, I mean,
functionally, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, it would be very difficult were it not for Bitcoin. You know, for this guy to sell his music anywhere outside the country he's in. But I, in the United States now, can go online and for minuscule price, download his MP3s. And by the way, people still do pay for music. It's a musician's trying to make some bread, and in a country that is under crippling sanctions, as our president put it. If it helps him even a little bit, that's good for humanity. The album is it's sort of.
Is it to your taste?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of
more about the support.
Yeah, it was more about the. I mean, it's okay. It's sort of like kind of music you would hear in like a spa when you're getting like a microdermabrasion facial or something. But
I see.
It's a good thing to listen to when you're burning aromatherapy candles. But
right.
That's not an album that I would want to go to jail for.
Right.
But
it's good that you check that.
Yeah. So.
You occasionally write about Bitcoin, but American Banker, it seems like, has been running quite a few stories about Bitcoin between you and John Matonis.
Yeah.
What kind? You speak to financial professionals and people who are specifically in the industry.
Yeah.
What type of a reception have you gotten from your audience? Are you getting, people saying, "Why are you covering this?" Or is it more curiosity, or what's
There's a lot of curiosity. It's all over the map. For most bankers right now, I wouldn't say Bitcoin is top of mind for them. They've got a lot of issues. They've got the Dodd-Frank legislation, which is thousands of pages long, and a lot of it hasn't really been put into practice yet because the regulators still haven't written all the rules. They've got the Basel III capital regulations, which are still being ironed out. Interest rates, low interest rates have made it very hard for them to make money in their traditional business of taking deposits and making loans. Long-term rates are starting to tick up. But that's been a mixed blessing for them because the mortgage refi boom that they've been enjoying, they've been getting a lot of earnings out of for a while, has been just came to an abrupt halt. Now they got to lay off all the mortgage people they've been hiring. So bankers are very conservative by nature. They're risk averse, at least when it comes to certain types of risks. They've got a lot of things on their plate right now. There's some skepticism. Obviously, you can tell from behavior that they're wary of dealing with Bitcoin-related businesses, probably just out of a compliance risk concern. But there's also curiosity about it, and I think there is some recognition that there needs to be innovation. We did a series on BankThink recently called The Future Model of Banking, which John contributed to, and John thinks that there is an opportunity for the banks to serve these businesses, to help them on the compliance front, because the banks, if nothing else, know compliance very well. He said it's kind of like their last mulligan in payments before they get truly disrupted. I'm very glad that John writes a column for us. I really like having a voice like that in the mix. I mean, it's not core quite yet, Bitcoin, but it's part of, I think, a core theme for financial services now and in the years to come is disruption. And Bitcoin is one of the most disruptive technologies there is. It's funny because in banking we ooh and ah over things like mobile remote capture of checks. That's
right.
That's really just sort of like a
kind of update to an antiquated technology.
It's a patch. And one point that Shaq did on that sort of concluding panel we did.
That's Shaquille Khan.
Yeah, Shaquille Khan. Just the absurdity that in 2013, I can send you an email and you'll get it in seconds. You can download an MP3 in seconds, or I can send you any kind of data file in seconds. But to transfer money to someone, even like $10 through the banking system is such a hassle, and it can take days, and it can cost more than the amount of money that you're sending.
Well, this is that one-size-fits-all thing again.
Exactly. And I think that an important example is the automated clearinghouse is a payment system that is collectively owned by the banks. Sometimes if you look on your bank statement, you see ACH. That's what that means. It means that this money was sent through the automated clearinghouse. It is one of the lower cost payment systems in the traditional banking world. About a year ago, there was a vote among the bank members over whether to basically make it mandatory that everyone be ready to do real-time payment or same-day settlement of funds on ACH. a majority of members voted for it, but they did not get the 75% that they needed to pass it. So instead, what NACHA, that's the association that oversees ACH, is doing is a voluntary same-day settlement. What that means is that it's really only same day if both the sender's bank and the receiver's bank are participating.
I mean, it seems like it's inconvenient for customers, and if it's inconvenient for customers, then it should be a problem as far as the bank is concerned. So what is the incentive for the banks not to do this?
There were objections over the cost of updating systems. There were concerns about fraud.
But isn't this a bank-to-bank system?
It's a bank-to-bank system, but that someone has like stolen account information or something.
I see.
They want
time to be able to find that out and reverse it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And of course, no one will admit this, but some of the suspicion was the big banks didn't want to cannibalize wire transfer revenues. And this has been reported that it was the big banks that killed it. I mean, some of the little banks objected, but little banks, I think, generally were either for it or indifferent. It was the big banks that torpedoed it in the end, because I think they get a disproportionate share of the votes because they do more volume on the system. Bitcoin has shown that you can, not that Bitcoin is necessarily the only way or the best way, but it has shown that it is possible to transfer a digital monetary asset almost instantly and have it be done, right?
Is there a space for alternatives? I mean, this is a question that I've really been thinking about a lot. With systems like this, with the ACH, the reason why they can get away with that and not have to update to more modern sort of standards, really, because that's what we're talking about. Like Jacques was saying, you can't send small amounts of money or even large amounts of money fast, but you can with these alternatives. And to a certain extent, you can apply that same sort of standard to the current monetary regimes that we live in, where we have money and everyone is inflating their currency around the world, and so long as everyone inflates at the same time, basically, and when I say inflate, I mean add to the monetary supply. So long as everybody kind of plays along with that game and keeps in tandem with each other, then nothing really changes. But when you introduce alternatives to the situation, that seems like it's dangerous to the equilibrium of the system. I've been wondering whether there is a place in a system like we have now for any kind of alternative that fixes these problems to the detriment of the existing system.
I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. The reaction to Bitcoin so far, you could read it either way. I mean, the FinCEN director did say, we welcome the innovation of virtual currencies, and we just want them to follow the law and follow the rules. We'll see if that's lip service or how sincere that is. I think in the long term, it's and we talked last time about a little bit about the anti-fragile book. In the long term, it's better for stability to have lots of centers than one center. If you buy Nassim Taleb's argument, one center, one point of failure, it's more dangerous than if you have lots and lots and lots of different heads and lots of different nodes. I think it's in everyone's interest to be a little bit more flexible and just say let 1,000 flowers bloom, to use a phrase coined by a guy who didn't mean it, but it's a great phrase, and that's the way that I think about it. Even if it threatens your, because I don't think Bitcoin tomorrow is going to take away a whole lot of revenue from Western Union or PayPal, and it might over the long term, but supposedly we believe in a society that competition's healthy, and that competition will. Bitcoin could be good for banks in the long-term sense, in that if it forces them to become more responsive to customers, and it forces them to streamline and to, not have this confusing, your available balance is your present balance. I can't believe they still do that in 2013. As a consumer, I never got that, and I know it's because they've got these old systems and it's complicated. Maybe it's comparing apples to oranges to compare the two, but it's just funny. Bitcoiners get frustrated when they have to wait 20 minutes for a confirmation, but that's going to be what the standard is, and that's going to be what people demand. I think it's in everyone's interest to let the alternatives do.
Marc Hochstein, American banker, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, always.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at seansoutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.